Welcome back to the channel. Today, we are taking a close look at a fascinating Australian commemorative coin, the Australia 50 cents from 1994, issued for the United Nations International Year of the Family. If you have this coin in your collection, you may be wondering whether it is rare and what it could be worth in today's collector market. The 1994 Australian 50-cent coin is an interesting piece of modern Australian numismatic history. The Royal Australian Mint officially records this coin as a commemorative 50-cent issue celebrating the United Nations International Year of the Family. The design was created by Australian artist Carolyn Rosser. The 50-cent denomination itself has a long history in Australia. It was first introduced with Australia's decimal currency on 14 February 1966. After the original silver version was discontinued, the denomination returned in 1969 in a 12-sided shape and a copper-nickel composition. The 1994 commemorative coin follows this modern 12-sided 50-cent format. According to the Royal Australian Mint, the standard specifications for Australian 50-cent coins from 1969 onward are with a mass of and a diameter of across the flats. The International Year of the Family theme gives this coin additional historical interest. It was produced to recognize the United Nations International Year of the Family in 1994, making it more than just an ordinary piece of Australian pocket change. Commemorative circulating coins like this are specifically issued to mark events or themes considered significant and of broad interest to the Australian community. Now let's talk about mintage and rarity. The Royal Australian Mint lists the 1994 International Year of the Family 50-cent coin with a mintage of approximately pieces. That number is important because it means this coin should not automatically be considered an extremely rare coin simply because it is old or commemorative. More than 21 million were produced, so ordinary circulated examples can still be found. However, condition makes a major difference. A coin that has remained in very fine condition, with attractive surfaces, clear details, and limited signs of wear, can be more desirable to collectors than a heavily worn example. So, what is this 1994 Australian 50-cent coin worth today? For a normal circulated example level, depending on condition and buyer interest. A very fine condition example can command a premium, but the exact selling price varies considerably depending on the coin's appearance, provenance, market demand, and whether it has any unusual characteristics. For a typical 1994 International Year of the Family 50-cent coin in very fine condition, a reasonable collector market estimate is around $2.45, $0 to $2.80, $0, with particularly attractive examples potentially bringing more from the right collector. This should be treated as an approximate market range rather than a guaranteed price, because individual sales can vary. It is also important to remember that the word rare is often used too broadly in online coin videos and listings. A commemorative coin can be collectible without being genuinely scarce. The mintage recorded by the Royal Australian Mint suggests that the 1994 issue is better described as a collectible commemorative coin rather than an exceptionally rare Australian 50-cent coin. Condition is one of the biggest factors you should examine. On a very fine example, the major design elements should remain clearly visible, while the coin may show noticeable but moderate circulation wear. Look closely at the high points of the design, the lettering, the date, and the overall surface. Heavy scratches, corrosion, cleaning marks, or damage can reduce collector interest, while an attractive original surface can make the coin more appealing. You should also check your coin carefully for anything unusual. Mint errors, significant die varieties, or other genuine abnormalities can sometimes make an otherwise common coin considerably more interesting to collectors. However, a dark color, surface stain, or ordinary environmental toning does not automatically make a coin rare or valuable. If you plan to sell your coin, don't clean it before having it evaluated. Cleaning can leave permanent hairlines and reduce its desirability. Instead, keep the coin in a protective holder and compare it with reliable collector references and recent market sales. The Royal Australian Mint itself explains that coin valuation depends on factors including rarity, condition, and collector demand. and recommends researching the coin or consulting professional coin distributors for valuation. The biggest lesson from this coin is that age alone does not determine value. The 1994 International Year of the Family 50 cent is a great example of a coin that has historical and commemorative interest, but its relatively high mintage means that most ordinary examples are not extremely expensive. So, if you have one of these coins in very fine condition, don't expect a fortune, but don't overlook it either. It is a genuine Australian commemorative issue with an interesting connection to the United Nations International Year of the Family, and it can make a nice addition to a collection of Australian decimal coins. Before selling, take a good look at the condition, check for genuine varieties or errors, compare current collector market prices, and remember that the final selling price depends on what a buyer is actually willing to pay. Next up, today we are taking a close look at a very interesting Australian commemorative coin, the Australia 50 cents 2003 Australia's Volunteers coin. If you have one of these coins in your collection, you may be wondering whether it is actually rare and what it could be worth in today's collector market, especially in fine condition. The 2003 Australian 50 cent coin was released to commemorate the important contribution of volunteers across Australia. The Royal Australian Mint records this coin as a commemorative 50 cent design celebrating Australia's volunteers, with the design created by Vladimir Gottwald. The circulation mintage was approximately coins, so this is not an extremely low mintage coin. The reverse of the coin is particularly attractive because it brings together different activities associated with volunteering. The design represents the many ways Australians contribute their time and effort to their communities. The obverse features the fourth portrait of Queen Elizabeth II, designed by Ian Rank Broadley, with the inscription, Elizabeth Ascend Australia 2003. This 50-cent coin is made from giving it the familiar cupro-nickel appearance of Australian decimal coins. It weighs approximately and has a diameter of about. It also has the distinctive 12-sided shape associated with Australia's modern 50-cent coins. Now let's talk about condition. A coin described as fine condition has experienced noticeable circulation. The major design details should still be visible, but there can be surface marks, scratches, dullness, and general wear from being handled and used. For this reason, a circulated fine condition example normally has much less collector value than an uncirculated or professionally graded example. So what is this coin worth today? Current published collector price information shows that higher grade examples can command more than their face value. For the 2003 Volunteers 50-cent coin, a market guide updated in May 2026 lists approximately mint state values with a circulated fine condition coin. For a normal fine condition 2003 Australia's Volunteers 50-cent coin, a realistic collector market estimate would generally be around $2.50, $0 to $2.70, $0 depending on the exact appearance, buyer demand, and whether the coin has any unusual characteristics. This is an estimate rather than a guaranteed selling price, because actual transactions can vary. The coin becomes more interesting if it has exceptional preservation, a recognized mint error, a major variety, or comes from a desirable proof or uncirculated set. The Royal Australian Mint also issued special proof and uncirculated versions connected with the 2003 Volunteers theme. One important point for collectors is that rare does not automatically mean valuable. With nearly circulation examples, the standard 2003 Volunteers 50-cent coin is relatively available compared with genuinely scarce Australian issues. Its appeal comes from its commemorative design, historical theme, collectability, and condition rather than simply from a low mintage. If you own one of these coins, examine both sides carefully. Look at the Queen Elizabeth II portrait, the date, the lettering, the detailed volunteer imagery, and the edge. Avoid cleaning the coin, because polishing or chemical cleaning can damage the original surface and may reduce its desirability to collectors. So, to conclude, the Australia 50 cents 2003 Australia's Volunteers coin is a fascinating commemorative issue with a meaningful national theme. In ordinary fine circulated condition, it is generally a modest value collectible while exceptionally high-grade certified coins can reach considerably higher prices, according to current collector guides. Next up, today we are taking a close look at an interesting Australian commemorative coin, the 2005 Australia 50-cent coin celebrating the Australian Commonwealth Games in Melbourne. If you have one of these coins in your collection, you may be wondering whether it is simply worth its due, or whether the collectors are willing to pay more for a well-preserved example. The 2005 coin was issued as an official commemorative for the Melbourne 2006 Commonwealth Games. Although the games themselves took place in 2006, this particular 50-cent coin was released in 2005. The design was selected through a student design competition, and the winning design was created by Victorian student Kelly Just. The coin features the standard portrait of Queen Elizabeth II on the obverse, while the commemorative reverse celebrates the Commonwealth Games. This is a large Australian 50-cent coin with the familiar 12-sided shape. It is made from copper nickel, consisting of approximately. The coin weighs about and has a diameter of approximately. One important thing to understand about this coin is that it is collectible, but it is not automatically a high-value rarity simply because it commemorates the Commonwealth Games. Around examples of the student-designed Commonwealth Games 50-cent type were produced, so circulated examples can still be found by collectors. Now let's talk about condition. A coin in very fine condition will normally show noticeable signs of circulation, but the major design details should remain clear. The better the surfaces, lettering, edges, and overall appearance, the more attractive the coin becomes to collectors. If your coin has unusually sharp details, minimal marks, and excellent original surfaces, it may appeal to collectors looking for a higher-grade example. So what is this coin worth today? For an ordinary circulated example, the market value can be only a little above its Australian 50-cent. Current collector and dealer listings show that examples of this type can be offered for those 30,000 Australian dollars, while uncirculated examples in presentation packaging can command considerably more. For example, current listings have shown uncirculated examples around the equivalent of roughly $50,000 to $78,000, depending on the packaging, seller, and condition. For a very fine condition coin, a demand, and whether it has any unusual characteristics. Recent collector discussion has also mentioned ordinary examples around the $2,000 to $40,000 range, reinforcing that this is generally a modest value commemorative rather than a coin worth $280,000. However, there is an important exception. If your 2005 Commonwealth Games 50-cent coin has a genuine mint error, an unusual variety, or an exceptionally high grade, its value could be significantly different. Collectors should never assume that damage, discoloration, scratches, or corrosion are mint errors. Genuine mint errors are created during the manufacturing process and need to be carefully authenticated. If you own one of these coins, my advice is simple: do not clean it. Cleaning can damage the original surface and may reduce its desirability to collectors. Instead, keep the coin in a protective holder and examine both sides carefully. Look at the date, lettering, Queen Elizabeth II's portrait, the Commonwealth Games design, the edge, and the overall condition. The 2005 Australia 50-cent Aviate Commonwealth Games coin is an attractive piece of modern Australian history. It connects Australian coinage with the Melbourne Commonwealth Games and represents an interesting commemorative issue for collectors of Australian decimal most coins. So, if your example is in very fine condition, a reasonable estimate for today's, while particularly attractive, uncirculated examples or coins with genuine collectible errors can be worth more. Remember that coin values change over time, and the actual selling price depends on condition, authenticity, buyer demand, and the marketplace. Next up, today we are taking a close look at a fascinating Australian 50-cent coin from 2004 featuring three of Australia's best-known native animals: the lorikeet, the koala, and the wombat. If you have found one of these coins in an old collection, coin jar, or box of circulated change, you may be wondering whether it is actually rare and how much it could be worth in today's collector market. The 2004 Australian 50-cent Australian Fauna coin is a 12-sided copper-nickel coin with a weight of about and a diameter of approximately. The reverse design features the lorikeet, koala, and wombat, while the obverse carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II. The Royal Australian Mint confirms that Australia's 50-cent denomination has been part of the decimal currency system since 14 February 1966. This particular design has an interesting story behind it. The design came from a primary school student competition held in 2003, which attracted more than the winning design by John Serrano of St. Peter's Primary School, brought together three recognizable Australian bush animals: the wombat, lorikeet, and koala. The design was subsequently released as a 50-cent coin in 2004. Now let's talk about the condition of the coin. You described this example as being in rust-circulated condition. For collectors, circulation marks, scratches, surface wear, discoloration, and corrosion can have a significant effect on value. A circulated coin may still be an interesting collectible, but it normally does not command the same price as a sharply struck, uncirculated example with clean original surfaces. The composition is another important detail. This 2004 Australian 50-cent coin is made from copper nickel rather than silver. It has the familiar 12-sided Australian 50-cent shape and a smooth edge. Because it is not a silver circulating coin, its value is primarily determined by collector interest, condition, variety, provenance, and whether the coin has an unusual minting error. So, is this coin rare? The answer needs a little explanation. The 2004 Australian Fauna 50-cent coin is certainly collectible and has an attractive design, but an ordinary circulated example should not automatically be considered a high-value rarity. Online listings sometimes advertise these coins for extremely high prices, but an asking price is not the same thing as a confirmed selling price. For example, one online listing describes the coin as rare, while another collector-oriented catalog gives a much more modest market indication. For a normal circulated example in the kind of worn or rust-discolored condition described here, a realistic collector market estimate would generally be around $1.50, $0 to $1.70, $0 depending on the exact condition and buyer interest. A particularly attractive example with less wear could bring somewhat more, while a heavily damaged or corroded example may sell close to. For comparison, one coin catalog currently lists an approximately market indication for an XF example of the 2004 Australian Fauna 50-cent coin. That should be treated as an indicative catalog value rather than a guaranteed selling price. There are also special versions of this design that should not be confused with an ordinary circulated coin. Proof and silver collector issues exist, and these can have substantially different values from the standard copper-nickel circulating version. A 2004 silver-proof version, for example, also carries the koala, lorikeet, and wombat design. This is why checking your coin carefully is so important. Look closely at the date, denomination, animal design, edge, surface, and overall condition. If you believe your coin has a minting error, such as an unusual strike, doubled design, major die problem, or another genuine mint error, it could deserve further examination. However, ordinary scratches, dents, discoloration, and corrosion caused by circulation or environmental exposure are generally not considered valuable mint errors. If your 2004 Australian Fauna 50-cent coin has rust or dark surface discoloration, do not aggressively clean it. Cleaning can leave scratches and permanently reduce collector appeal. It is usually better to preserve the coin in its current condition and, if you think it may be valuable, have it examined by an experienced numismatist or reputable coin dealer. The collector demand for this coin comes partly from its attractive Australian wildlife theme. Koalas, wombats, and lorikeets are strongly associated with Australian wildlife, making this issue interesting to both Australian decimal collectors and people who collect animal-themed coins. The educational story behind the design also gives the coin an extra point of interest. So, what is the bottom line? If you have a 2004 Australia 50-cent Australian Fauna coin featuring the lorikeet, koala, and wombat in circulated, rust-discolored condition, it is a collectible piece, but you should be realistic about its value. Special proof, silver, uncirculated, or genuinely error varieties are a different category and can be worth considerably more. Next up, today we are taking a close look at an interesting Australian commemorative coin, the 2010 Australia Day 50 cents. If you have found one of these coins in an old collection, coin jar, box, or pocket change, you may be wondering whether it is rare and how much it could be worth today. The 2010 Australia Day 50-cent coin was released to commemorate and celebrate Australia Day. The Royal Australian Mint worked in consultation with the National Australia Day Council, and the design was created by mint sculptor Vladimir Gottwald. The reverse features an impression of Australia made from ribbons, surrounded by a circle of people, representing togetherness, spirit, pride, and celebration. This is a genuine circulating commemorative coin, rather than simply a normal 2010 50-cent piece. The Royal Australian Mint records approximately Australia Day 50-cent coins for 2010, while another detailed coin reference gives a circulation mintage of approximately. That means the coin is collectible and interesting, but it is not an extremely scarce coin in circulated condition. The coin has a denomination of 50 cents and is made from a copper-nickel alloy. Containing it weighs approximately and measures about with a smooth edge. He says. The obverse carries the portrait of Queen Elizabeth II with the inscription, identifying Australia and the year 2010. The Australia Day reverse carries the words, Celebrate What's Great, and Australia Day around the commemorative design. Now let's talk about the condition mentioned for today's coin. Rust brown front and back condition. Brown, dark, or discolored surfaces can occur because of environmental exposure, storage conditions, contamination, or surface oxidation. For a collector, the important point is that unusual color alone does not automatically make a coin rare or valuable. In fact, if the brown appearance represents damage, staining, corrosion, or environmental deterioration, it can reduce the coin's desirability compared with a clean original example. The value of a 2010 Australia Day 50-cent coin depends heavily on condition. Current reference values show that high-grade examples can bring considerably more than, for example, coins in Australia lists Australia Day examples around. Those figures are for high-grade mint state coins and should not be applied directly to a circulated brown or rusty-looking example. A circulated specimen like the one described in this video would normally have a much lower collector value. Another reference gives an estimated value of about while emphasizing that actual value changes with condition, mintage, finish, and collector demand. So, for a 2010 Australia Day 50-cent coin in rust brown circulated condition, a realistic collector market estimate would generally be around $1.45, 0 to $1.78, 0 assuming the coin is genuine and does not have an important mint error or unusual variety. In Australian currency, that is roughly around the value of a few 250,000 Australian dollars, although actual selling prices can be higher or lower depending on the buyer, platform, location, and exact condition. The situation changes if your coin has something genuinely unusual. Collectors should carefully check the date, lettering, design details, edge, strike quality, and overall appearance. A major minting error can potentially make an otherwise common commemorative coin much more interesting. But normal wear, brown toning, stains, or surface damage should not automatically be described as an error. It is also important to compare your coin with genuine examples before deciding that it is rare. The Royal Australian Mint confirms that the Australia Day 50-cent design was officially issued as a circulating coin, and the Mint's information states that millions were scheduled for circulation. If your example is exceptionally well preserved, with strong original surfaces and minimal contact marks, its value can rise significantly. Certified high-grade pieces are a different category from ordinary circulated coins. Professional grading can sometimes help when a coin appears to be in unusually high condition, but grading costs should always be considered before submitting a relatively common coin. One important tip for collectors is do not clean the coin. Avoid polishing, rubbing, chemicals, abrasive materials, or household cleaning products. Cleaning can leave permanent marks and may make a potentially collectible coin less desirable. Instead, Keep it in a suitable protective holder and store it somewhere dry and stable. So, is the 2010 Australia Day 50-cent coin rare? It is certainly a popular commemorative Australian coin with an attractive patriotic design and collector interest. But the circulated version is not considered an extremely rare coin. Its value becomes much more interesting in excellent condition, especially when the coin has strong original surfaces or a recognized minting error